what makes you qualified to have a discussion, to be a voice where men are talking about, it's called Man Enough. Mm-hmm. What makes you qualified to be a part of that conversation and have a voice?
The same thing that makes you the most qualified to have a conversation about whiteness. That you as a black man understand whiteness far more than I understand it, or Justin can understand it.
What a great answer.
And it's not to say that it's your labor or your work, but you actually can teach us way more about it because you have had to deal with it every single minute. When you're the oppressed group, you know everything about the oppressor. You know things that they don't even know about themselves.
What she said. 10 days out, we're hearing that inexplicably, so many male voters are still wavering between the choice of a convicted felon and a qualified woman who also happens to be the current vice president of the United States. So let's talk about it. Joining me now is that brilliant woman that you just saw, Liz Plank, MSNBC columnist and the author of For the Love of Men. Liz, you've been doing the hard work. You've been traveling across our country, talking to men about their fascination with fascism and masculinity in general. What are they telling you?
Such a good question. Such a good segment. Thank you, Katie. Yeah, I've been traveling across swing states. I'm pretty much on the road until the election, talking to male voters. And one thing that's really clear is that their shift to the right is not because they're uncomfortable with women's place in society. It's actually because they're uncomfortable with their own. A lot of men, right, we've changed the definition of what it means to be a woman. It's fundamentally changed in the best way possible. But a lot of men are lost about what it means to be a man in that structure, right, in that society. And you have people like Donald Trump who are exploiting those confusions and those fears. And those are really fears that are rooted in real things. I mean, if you just look at the data, I mean, the average male wage is the same now than it was in 1970. But the reason for that and the policies that continue that kind of disparity are the policies that Trump basically advances, right? Donald Trump is interested in giving tax cuts to his friends. Elon Musk made the most money than any other person on earth while Trump was president. And so the economic agenda, we need to be very clear here that Donald Trump is actually failing the men that he claims to be championing.
So, Liz, last night, Vice President Harris had a few words for the men at that rally. Take a quick listen.
Men across America do not want to see their daughters and wives and sisters and mothers put at risk because their rights have been taken. I see the men here, and I thank you. The men of America don't want this.
I mean, Liz, it doesn't have to be the bro culture that we see of the Tucker Carlson, Donald Trump type of mantras. I think it's somebody like Tim Walz. He's successfully threaded the needle of turning the idea of masculinity on its head by showing a deep empathy for women's issues, but at the still time being the coach, the dad, the hunter, the military veteran.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Tim Walz uses his masculinity for good, and Donald Trump exploits it for his own gain. And can we talk about masculinity, right? Like, Trump is putting on a performance of masculinity because he's not actually masculine. I mean, this is a guy who spends more time with his makeup artist than with his own advisors. But even setting aside that he probably wears more makeup than Kamala Harris, masculine men aren't afraid of women. They're not afraid to debate women. Masculine men don't have meltdowns on stage because a woman that they didn't like asked them a question that they didn't like. Masculine men aren't manipulated by people who give them compliments. I mean, at this point, Donald Trump is Putin's side check, to put it very bluntly and very simply. And you know what? Masculine men actually protect women. They don't enact abortion bans that endanger women. And so even based on Donald Trump's own definition of masculinity, and if you want hyper masculinity of being a protector of women, Donald Trump is failing at his own definition of it. And this sort of, masculinity Eras tour that he's on, where he's talking about a dead golfer's manhood, where he's blowing kisses to Hulk Hogan. To your point, I mean, this is a performance because actually Trump is not a very masculine man, according to his own definition of it.
So, Liz, our friend Anand Giridharadas wrote a piece for The Ink that echoes your sentiments about men and fascism. He actually referenced you in the piece. He says John Kelly, Trump's former chief of staff, warned in the starkest terms that Trump is a fascist with a real authoritarian vision and confirmed the murmurs about Trump being jealous not to have the kind of generals that Hitler did. The distressing thing is that a majority of American men are looking at all of this and saying, yeah, let's do that. We are dude-broing our way into democratic death. A lot of what a lot of men are going through right now is simply the inner experience of the old line. When you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression. I mean, Liz, you're talking to these men. Is that what is going on?
You have basically Donald Trump and J.D. Vance appealing to men's worst version of themselves, right? The fascists, the dominating, okay, we're just going to burn it all to the ground because I am not getting what I want. And again, some of this dissatisfaction that men are feeling is really rooted in a real suffering, right? And it's not unique to men, but it's definitely affecting men's ability to be providers, which is their sort of core identity as men. And then you have, again, the other side, Tim Walz and Kamala Harris, who are offering a very different vision. And I think that this election is showing us that we are at a crossroads. We do need a positive new vision of what men can be and what men need to be able to see that. And they have the ability to make this choice in this election. I think that men can have a very central, very important role in, again, protecting women, protecting children from predators, from people who do not have our best interest at heart. And so I think that we need to be clear that the most masculine thing that a man can do is actually vote for a woman.
And protecting from predators like Donald Trump. Liz Plank,
exactly.
Thanks so much. I invite everybody who's tuning in, go check out Liz's Substacks. They are amazing.